battle chip that has both long range and close range capabilities, has 3 tiers, can be found fairly easy early game, and has the potential to do multiple hits to multiple enemies. Coming at you next is the Wave series. First up is ShockWave, which does 40 damage. MegaMan pulls out a pickaxe and sends a shockwave rocketing down the row he's standing in. This shockwave has the potential to hit viruses multiple times. Then there's SonicWave, or SonicWave as it was interestingly abbreviated in the first game, which is slightly faster and does 60 damage. And finally there's DynaWave, the fastest of the 3, which does 90 damage. Shockwave's not your thing? How about terrain-changing, earth-shattering weights? Shaking things up next is the Earthquake series. First up is Quake 1. It has the same range as a bomb, but instead MegaMan throws a large flappy weight, which cracks the panel it lands on and deals 90 damage. Then there's Quake 2, which is a flappy 2 weight that does 110 damage, and also hits the panel above and below the impact point. And finally there's Quake 3, which throws a flappy 3, does 130 damage, and hits the panel up, down, left, and right from the impact point. For those close range fighters, sometimes a sword just isn't what you need. Sometimes you just want to go up to the enemy and give them a good wallop. And that's just what this series is for. Knock their lights out with the Punch series. So first up is GutsPunch, or as it's known in the anime, Mega Guts Thump. MegaMan hits viruses one panel ahead of him with a giant fist that does 70 damage. And then there's ColdPunch, which was originally Ice Punch in the first game, and functions exactly the same as GutsPunch except does 70 aqua damage. It should also be noted that punch chips have the power to push stage objects and use them as projectiles, such as rock cubes, prisms to a lesser extent, ice cubes, or the magical unbreakable blocks that are featured in Versus mode. Seriously, what are these things made out of? The next battle chip is a standalone chip, one that really doesn't belong with anything else, despite the fact that later down the road there is another battle chip with a similar appearance. It's time to talk about DashAttack. So DashAttack. MegaMan takes a fishy-shaped glider and dashes from one end of the screen to the other, doing 90 damage to anything he touches. Hey, remember the howitzer battle chip from the first game? Well, now it kinda has its own series in this game. Yup, coming at you next, breaking up your world, it's the Wrecker series. So first up is Wrecker. As the name suggests, you throw a wrecking ball with the same range as a bomb that cracks the panel it lands on. It does 80 damage, but it has an added bonus. You see, this is a battle chip that's known of another type in later games called Break, which means it can bust through guards. And then there's CannonBall, which is pretty much just a powered up wrecker that does 150 damage. Spikes, spikes, spikes everywhere! This next series will allow you to spear enemies with the greatest accuracy. Pointing right at you is the Arrow series. So first up is DoubleNeedle. MegaMan uses a bow to fire 2 arrows across the row he's standing in, each one doing 50 damage. Next up is TripleNeedle, which fires 3 arrows. Next is QuadraNeedle, which fires 4. As you'll probably notice now, the needles are gold-tipped. And finally there's Trident, which does 60 damage and fires 3 large gold tridents. The next series of chips is quite an interesting one. A series of semi-guided mouse bombs. Squeak, squeak! It's the Ratton series. First up is Ratton 1, a red mouse bomb that does 70 damage. Notice how they also turn when thrown. Then there's Ratton 2, a yellow mouse bomb which does 80 damage. Ratton 3, which inflicts 90 damage and fires a blue mouse. And FireRat, which does 200 fire damage. However, on its own, FireRat's really just a stage object. You need to ignite it with a fire battleship in order to set it off. Sometimes, stacking damage with weaker attacks is a lot more effective than going all out with powerful attacks. And stacking with weaker attacks is what this next series is very good at doing. Blow them away with the Twister series. So the idea with the Twister series is that it produces some form of tornado or twister that can do up to 8 hits in 1 second, 2 panels ahead of MegaMan. First is Tornado, which does 20 neutral damage. Then there's Twister, which functions exactly the same but does 20 wood damage with every hit. And Blower, which still functions exactly the same but does 20 fire damage with every hit. Earlier I mentioned that there was a battle chip that looked like DashAttack but was completely unrelated. This next chip is that chip I was talking about. Causing confusion and incinerating everything in sight, it's the Burner battle chip. The Burner battle chip engulfs MegaMan in a wall of flames that does 150 fire damage to any enemy it touches. While this next series may not have much in the power department, it makes up for it by being able to paralyze any enemy it hits. Sparking up the battlefield is the ZapRing series. So first up is ZapRing 1. It fires a speedy electrified disc that does 20 electric damage and paralyzes enemies. Then there's ZapRing 2, which does 30 damage. And finally there's ZapRing 3, which does 40 damage. So that last series of electric battle chips was probably a tad underwhelming. But this next series makes up for it, especially in power. Round and round and round they go. Where the satellites stop, nobody knows. So first up is Satellite 1. It's a sparking, zigzagging satellite that moves in a sine wave-like pattern. It does 60 electric damage to the enemy it hits. Next up is Satellite 2, which moves slightly faster and does 80 electric damage. And Satellite 3, which does 100 electric damage. An interesting thing to note about the satellites is that when they reach a stage object, they orbit around it. Hello net battlers. Look at your battle chips, now look at mine, now back to your battle chips, now back to mine. Sadly, they're not as effective as mine, but if you combine them with the bad spice battle chips and poisoned all enemies on grass panels, they could be just as effective as mine. Using an unhealthy powder on all grass panels, Spice 1 inflicts 100 wood damage. Spice 2 inflicts 120 wood damage. And Spice 3 does 140 wood damage. Ever wanted a battle chip that just allows you to glue or magnetize enemies in place, as well as do some damage to them? Well, perhaps you should invest in the MagnetBomb series. MagnetBomb 1 has the same range as a bomb and does 80 electric damage. However, if the enemy it hits has more than 80 health, it will magnetize them in place. MagnetBomb 2 does 100 electric damage but also hits the panel above and below the impact point. And MagnetBomb 3 does 120 elect damage and affects enemies in a straight cross. While you may not be able to loop the loop, walk the dog, go around the world, or make the Eiffel Tower with this next series, it definitely packs a wallop, and doesn't need to do any of those tricks. Time to throw out and spin the Yo-Yo series! Yo-Yo 1 is a spinning saw blade yo-yo that does 40 damage with each hit and sweeps the 3 panels in front of MegaMan. Yo-Yo 2 is slightly more powerful, doing 50 damage with each hit. And Yo-Yo 3 is even more powerful, doing 60 damage with each hit. Having a good defense is always vital in battle, and when your shield can actually retaliate and do heavy damage to the enemy, that's even better. Bringing on the noms and the hugs of doom is the CurseShield series. So first up is CurseShield 1. MegaMan guards himself with the Dominode 1 for 1 second that retaliates when hit, doing 130 damage to whatever enemy it touches. CurseShield 2 protects MegaMan with the Dominode 2 that does 170 damage. And CurseShield 3, which protects MegaMan with the Dominode 3 that does 210 damage. With the addition of a new battle chip in this game, a standalone battle chip from the first game now has its own series. Get ready to give the enemies a wallop with the Hammer series. First up is the BreakHammer, a powerful close range hammer that does 100 damage. And now here is pretty much what happened the first time I used the ZeusHammer battle chip. Alright, let's try this out. Oh wow, that is awesome! So the deal with ZeusHammer is that basically anything standing on a panel will take damage, including you. The only way to avoid taking damage is by using air shoes or some form of barrier when executing the ZeusHammer. But what is probably the funniest thing about the ZeusHammer is, you can delete yourself with it! An additional benefit to this series of chips is that they can instantly destroy any stage object, from rock cubes, large stones, ice cubes, and even those indestructible cubes in multiplayer net battles. Oh wait, my bad, they're not indestructible, they just take a lot of hits. Viruses in the back row causing you no ends of trouble? Perhaps a surprise back attack is in order. Unleash the spearing fury of the Bamboo Lance battle chip. The Bamboo Lance spears all 3 panels in the back row, doing 90 wood damage.